From every strand on the line of your reel, to the rods, to the anglers, to the lures on the end of your hook, let's talk about those big bass here on Co-Angler's Corner with your hosts, Rob Welch and John Soukup.
Good evening, y'all. How you doing? I'm John.
Now you got me throwing off, man. Hi, y'all. Arcade Rob here hanging out with you. Got me disposed all backwards there. All right, go ahead, man.
Well, tonight we got a gentleman from Oklahoma. I don't know if he wants me to call him a gentleman, but he's a man from Oklahoma, Mr. John Soukup. He's very good with a jig. Won a lot of money with it. And last time we had him on, he was talking to us about that's one of his favorite ways to catch fish. So let's bring John in and learn about jig fishing.
Hey,
what's up, buddy?
Sir.
My wife likes to say I'm a gentleman and a scholar.
Yep.
There
Hey,
you
my
go.
preacher used to say that. My preacher used to say that in Mississippi 100 years ago. Hey, it's under it.
Well, I didn't want to
It's
start
under
the show off offending you, so.
No, yeah, I'm easily offended.
I could tell by your Facebook.
It's under it.
Yeah.
Sit on top of it.
All this Canadian cold that's come down here has just turned us all into hockey. We're just ready to fight. You know? Just ready to get mad at
I believe it.
and, you know.
Did you see the All-Star game?
No, just the highlight.
Yeah, same here. But no, John, if you don't mind going through and telling a little bit about who you are, and let's get into the jig fishing.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm not saving marriages with marriage advice, I like on social media.
Yep.
I like to jig fish. I grew up jig fishing. I fished. I fished a couple years in the elites. I fished the MPFL. I fished Forest Wood Cups and BFLs and everything in between. So most people know a little bit about me there. So, but as far as fishing goes, even though I have used a live scope and know exactly how to, destroy some fish on that, I grew up old school fishing. My dad put a jig in my hand at a very young age, and I think there was probably a couple decades of my life that's all I had on my deck going to any kind of fishing event, whether it was just fun from the creek or where it was a jig. So
yeah,
I've got an assortment after you called and said, let's do jig. I just grabbed a bunch of stuff out of the truck. I wanted to get my boat and get my actual stuff, but it's got 6 inches of snow and ice on it right now. So just pulled
I just want to say
some
thank you
stuff
for
out.
taking the snow from us.
Yeah, we robbed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, there's still a bunch of guys here in like Central Kentucky. There's a couple old school guys. They throw a jig year round. No matter where they are, they throw a jig year round. And they do pretty good. If they're in the top 5, jig bite was on that day.
Well, there is a lot to a jig. That's why there was so many jigs similar. And I don't have everything that I'd like to have, but I've got 12 to 15 different kinds of styles of jigs here and colors that I use. I guess the basic concept of what is a jig. I mean, a jig is just a lead head or tungsten now. We got tungsten heads onto some kind of hook, usually a straight shank. Depending on the style of fish that you're going for or the cover, it's going to will determine like the gauge of the hook. It can be light wire or it can be heavy. And then typically you're going to have some kind of weed guard, even though there's times where we completely cut the weed guard off. And, when you come down to the head of the jig, that's probably where a lot of discussion comes into what style of head, where the eye positioning's at, whether it's horizontal, vertical, and what angle it comes out. And that all has to do with, what you're going to do with the jig, what kind of cover that you're around. And that's the thing that you got to identify first. What cover am I around? Am I around grass? Am I around rocks? Am I around, wood? Am I around docks? Am I around muddy bottom, a firm bottom, gravel bottom? Then what kind of structure are you around? Like, how deep am I fishing a ledge? Am I dragging? Am I hopping? Am I swimming the jig? You can swim a jig, and that's why the jig's been probably the most versatile bait from the beginning. I think if you asked any pro, and even think about it now, even the jig head minnow, it's a jig with a minnow on it.
Yep.
I don't have any one of those laid out, but any pro will say if you can only give them one lure that they'd have to use year round, it would most likely, I think 90% would say it's a jig, because you can do so many things with a jig, you know.
Yep.
For goodness sakes, the chatterbait is, just a jig with a blade on it, So I've got them all spread out here, and I've got my favorite colors. One thing you're going to see when it talks about colors, to get that out of the way right off the bat, I'm pretty neutral. I pretty much have 3 colors, and that's it. I'll show you guys here. These are 2 different Arca style. I do black and blue, dirty water in springtime. Sometimes when I'm around tannic water, I'll use black, and then a brownish green. This is actually a brown. I lean a little bit more towards the brown than the green. I used to do a lot of green pumpkin stuff, but the brown, can kind of go anyway. And so I'll just bring these 2 colors with me. Now the other color that I have, is a white. So this right here is a swim jig, and we'll go into that. But a little combination, and we'll kind of go through that right here. This is a football jig, and if you see, it's just like the brown. It's got brown on it, and it's got white on it. And there's a football head and shiny, and we'll get into that when we get into it. And
cool.
Everything else you see here is literally, that's it. Those are the 3 colors that I have with me. One of my swim jigs that you see is really green, but it's got a little bit of blue and orange in it because, for a bluegill looking thing for swimming.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty simple when it comes to colors. I think that as long as you're kind of in the realm of what the fish are looking at, for example, if they're looking at feeding on craws or they're feeding on bluegill, things of that nature, I'm going to use, my browns. If in the springtime, when they first come up, the craws, before they molt, they'll start turning black. So that's when the blacks and blues, blacks and reds will work really good. If I'm looking to swim something and I think they're on big gizzards, and I'm just going to be using a big bright white bait of some kind. So those are really the simplicity of how I choose my colors.
The KISS method, the KISS method.
Yeah.
Can't beat it.
Keep it simple.
There you go.
So what's your setup for them? You probably have a couple different setups that you use depending on what jig you're throwing.
Yeah. I can kind of go through the setups now, or I can go through as I look at the jig. I'm looking down. I got a big table laid out here and everything. I'm
you good?
Where to start. But
that's up to you.
I've got everything. So my typical jig setup would be an older school flipping rod. Okay, so like a 7/6 length rod. I am taller, so I do like that little bit longer rod. The only difference in most of my jig rods would be I would want a little bit slower or softer, however you want to verse it tip. You want to let it load a little bit more. You don't want to pull that bait out of that fish's mouth when you first feel them suck in, especially on smallmouth. Usually it's the second thud that you set the hook on, and you kind of and my hook set's more of a reel into and pull when the bait's deeper. When it's shallower, then I'll pop it more like a flipping a Texas rig, something like that. So if it's more close combat, then I'm going to be able to do something a little bit stiffer because I'm wanting to pull them away from cover most likely. And that's the reason why I'm doing that. Maybe a little bit heavier rod. If I'm around a dock, like I'm skipping up underneath the dock, then I'm going to use more of a 6'11" to 7'2" is kind of the range of rod. And I want that to be a heavy. I don't want it to be medium heavy. I want it to be heavy. You lose leverage because the length of the rod's shorter, but you have to have that just to get that roll cast, because you need to get the tip of that rod closer to the water surface when you release to get that skip back in there. So you feel a little bit naked, you don't have that leverage, to pull that fish out, but you need to be able to get that stiffness to get them going on that. When I'm throwing, so I've also got these kind of jig heads too. I got some Ned rigs, shaky head, wobble heads. Yep. 2 different kinds of wobble heads. I can show you guys here. All that would cover anything from a worm this big, a biffle bug, a shaky head, and a little Ned rig that I made out of a Cinco here just a second ago. We can put all that on. So when I'm throwing my shaky head stuff and my Ned rig, I'm looking at a spinning rod 95% of the time. And I'm somewhere in that 7'2" to 7'6", depending on the cover that I'm around. I like the longer rod if I can get away with it. Sometimes you can't, when you're finessing stuff, like the lighter line you use, then I'll go down to the 7'2", but the 7'6", once again, it's just all about leverage for me. I found out a long time ago that it doesn't really matter the expense of the rod when it comes to landing percentage. It seems like I've used some really inexpensive rods, and when we kind of started to get that craze where they started pushing the rods over 7 foot and up to the 8 foot, I started finding out that my landing percentage was really high with longer rods. And so I use the longest rod as I can possible most all the time. Now, there's times where a shorter rod, to impart the right kind of action or to get around cover, I have to use a shorter rod.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'll use those longer rods because I want to just especially on the shaky head stuff or Ned rigs, I'm just reeling into that fish. I'm not setting the hook. I can tell you a story losing an 8-pounder. You follow Oklahoma, which is huge in Oklahoma bass, flipping a shaky head, and a bass grabs it right at the surface. And I got so excited I did one of those hook sets like that, and he just rolls over and spits it out. Like that's not a shaky head fish. You just let them swim and you just reel into them and just give them one of those, and that hook will pop out and land them. So I will say this as far as rods go on the wobble heads. This is a very big must for me. Anytime you're throwing a wobble head, whether it's a biffle bug or a big worm, I'm going to use a flip and stick rod. I want a heavier rod. You're going to have to penetrate that, and you want to get that fish moving quite a bit. If you will lose a lot of fish if you're using too soft of a tip of a rod. So where on a jig, like a football head jig, I may use a 7/6 medium heavy rod. If I have this out, I'm going to use more like a 7/6 heavy because I'm actually penetrating plastic to get this, through this plastic to get that fish. So those are a couple of the details I got there. Line, man, most of the time I'm using as heavy line as I can get away with. If I got a 3/4 ounce jig or a 1/2 ounce jig, I'm flipping under dock. I'm going to try to use 25-pound test if I can, fluorocarbon.
Yeah.
I don't ever go under 20 if I'm on a dock. I just now I'm also considering in my mind, I'm in the Oklahoma area. It's a little bit dirtier. There may be some guys up in clear water that are talking about smallmouth that are like, well, that won't work. Okay, that might be a situation. If I'm using a football jig, I'm using as heavy line as I can get away with.
Yep.
If they'll let me, I'll use 20, but I won't go down below more than like 15 typically. For a 3/4 to 1 ounce, this is a 1 ounce, jig. My diameter line is more for that purpose of just getting deep. If I go 35, 40 foot deep, I need thinner line just so I don't have to drag. When I'm swimming jigs, 2 different style swim jigs, we'll go over here in a second when we get there. If I can, I'm using braid. If I can get away with it, I'm using braid because I'm swimming it and I'm casting over things. I'm doing all that you can do. A lighter swim jig, most of the time I'm keeping it up on the surface. So you want it to float a little bit higher. So there's just no reason not to use that. Now, if I'm in really clear water and I'm not over a lot of cover, then I'll go down to fluoro. Spinning rod stuff, I'm 90% of the time I'm using 8-pound test. If I have to, the Ned, I might go down to 6. And if they're really eating it, I know I'm on it, and I can use a heavier shaky head, for example. If I'm getting away with using a 1/4 ounce shaky head and it's largemouth and I'm around timber, I might go all the way up to 12 to 14. And at that point, I've transitioned to where I'm using a braid fluoro leader. So I'm using braid. My braid will vary from 8 to 30-pound test depending on the situation, and then my leader will go from there. So anytime I'm using the wobble head stuff, I'm moving that bait and I'm fishing for big fish, especially if I'm throwing this thing on a wobble head. I don't know if you can see this, but this thing's a big old worm. I'm going to use 20 pounds, 17 at the minimum, but 20-pound test because I want that leverage. I want that penetrating power that fluorocarbon has.
Absolutely.
Nice. We got a couple comments we're going to run through real quick.
All right.
Barking Ruger says, the man, the myth, the legend. Let's go.
What's up, buddy?
And Die Hard Anglers says, good evening, everyone.
Hey, what's going on, Jared?
Daniel says, hey, John Rob.
Hey, Dan.
Barking Ruger says, John, we're living proof these boys will let anyone in here.
Yeah.
We came
my boy Joe's out. Yeah, I think so. That's what
Gary
he's
with
doing.
Die Hard Anglers says he throws a jig year round.
Good plan.
Andrew Pulliam says, hey, guys.
Hey, Andrew. What's going on, buddy? And the man himself.
Yeah, Jerry May says, what's up, folks? John, you suck at fishing. He's joking, of course. He says he's a fanboy and still want waiting on a T-shirt.
Okay.
Ashley Klaus says, "Hey guys."
Yep, had her just on Monday.
Wants to know what she wants to know what brand of jigs you use.
What brand line? What brand line there?
Line or jigs?
Line.
Sunline is what I'm using now. When I talk about the 20 to 25 and going under docks, there's a specific line that I use. And you know what? We're right here, so.
All right.
I'll just pull this thing out.
Good thing he has pants on, right?
You know what? Hey, I did it. I did it about 20 minutes ago. I had the thermal what do you call it? The sleeping pants on. And I was like, I wonder if I should change this. My wife was like, "You probably." I was like, "Yeah, I probably should." So this is the Sunline 2CFC. You guys can see it. Now the reason why it's unique is it's you see the orange. You guys can see it almost all looks orange. So it's metered. So you got 3 feet of clear fluoro, and then you got 2 feet of orange line. Anytime I'm around heavy cover, grass, docks, and I'm flipping and it's close, and I'm wanting a line watch, I'm throwing that. I mean, it's just as I get older, my eyes don't see. I love the line watch. I feel naked when like what's going on if I can't see my line, and also I can count. So if I throw over to a spot and I'm fishing, and all of a sudden I see my line, and I know I'm in 12 foot of water, and I see 2 meters of line go right, so I know 6 foot down, and the line just stops. It's either on something or the fish has got it. So I feel like you pick up a lot more. So that line right there, that's Sunline's 2CFC. This stuff right here, it's become my favorite line when it comes to flipping. Now, if it's not really a lot of, I'm not going to cast it on long casts for football jigs. It's not really designed for that. It's close quarter stuff. So if I get away from heavy cover and stuff, I'll go back to just Sunline, shooter. But
I got you.
That's amazing.
That's pretty slick, man. I like it.
Yeah. So like the old what do they call it? Lead line they have for trout fishing.
Yep.
Lead core.
Absolutely.
All right. Jeremy says he's been jumping on the BFS setups. What's your thoughts? We're talking jigs.
Yeah, is that the real BFS, the real stuff?
I think he's talking about the finesse.
Yeah.
And then Ashley comes back with
the brake finesse real system.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. She throws sniper.
Nothing wrong with that.
Barky Ruger, he's our age, so he's old. He can't beat the high vis.
Yep.
Sunline's the best to use.
Yeah, it's top notch. It's got good quality.
And Barking comes back again and says, I'll ask before Ashley does, what knot do you prefer for connecting braid to leader?
I throw an FG when that knot is exposed. Most of the time, I haven't got to where I'm doing it on my flipping stick yet. I know guys are, so this is just strictly speaking spinning rod stuff. I want that knot to slide through as easy as possible. And the thinnest knot I've ever come up with is FG. It gets frustrating tying it sometimes. And then I got the one, and I don't even know the name of it. It's probably a uni knot. I think that's what it's called. I'll tie that real fast inside my reel because it just, I can tie it real quick.
Yeah.
But
Jeremy says he uses the lefty cray knot.
Yep. I've heard about that one.
Yeah. Jeremy tried to teach me how to do that, and it didn't work.
Takes practice, man. You got practice.
Yeah. All right. So where do you want to go to next, John? This is your show. We're just talking.
Ooh, yeah, man, I will accept questions. I promise you that. So I'm going to just literally move left to right through my table. These are literally the jigs that I bring with me for every tournament. They're in my truck. I got like a mini Bass Pro in my truck, and these are replacements. So this is what I have in my boat. Nothing different, maybe a couple strands of color different or something like that. But this is one of my favorites that I do have some problems with it. And I know a company that's making one similar, but this is a Kitech. This is a tungsten. A buddy might show this to me. Tungsten jig head. And really started getting into this when I was going up north for smallmouth. When I was at Lay Lake, was it Lay Lake? No, I'm sorry. Smith Lake last year in the elites, we were fishing for Kentuckies, and I had some Kentuckies found on a ridge, and I would definitely throw this thing out and let it sit, and they'd come and eat that up. So what's unique about this is it's really small, compact, really small hook, so for smaller mouth fish, And this thing right here is a half ounce, even though it's just,
Wow.
This is next to a standard half ounce. So you can see it's a lot smaller. So anytime I want something more compact, that's what I'm going to throw. I've got it in 2 colors. Once again, go over the colors. I got brown and I got black. And that's it. Sorry. I'm sorry. I lied to you. I didn't mean to. Also in my boat, typically, actually, what I have in my boat is I've got the same black and brown, but then it's got some chartreuse strands because I really like throwing that when I'm around smallmouth. And when I don't feel like I want them, I just pull the strands out and it looks like that.
Oh, cool.
So, now, swim jig fishing. One of the coolest ways to catch fish anywhere. I mean, when I was just down in Rayburn, if the water temperature hadn't dropped 20 degrees, there was a monster swim jig bite that we found on the last day of practice. Caught some big ones, shook off some big ones. But this by far is the best swim jig that I've ever found on the market. The 100% best. And you're going to see, I've got all sorts of different brands and stuff, but this is the West Logan Arc jig. All right. Yep. Arky swim jig. And what's neat about this, now I do 2 colors. I do bright white, and this is like a kind of a bluegill color.
Yep.
Okay, there's the thing. You guys will notice it's got that triangle shape.
Yeah.
And that triangle shape, when you're talking about coming through grass and over the top of any kind of cover, it keeps things level. And also the way that the eye is come directly this way instead of from the top, pulls and penetrates. So then when it hits cover, it's got that little skid mark. And you can you can challenge yourself, pick this thing up. I throw it most of the time. I'm going to throw it with a big paddle tail, like a 5-inch swim paddle tail. I may put on just like a chunk. This is, a chunk trailer. I may put on something like that. And I may put on a crawl. If I throw a crawl, typically it's a bigger crawl, and I'm wanting to keep it up higher and flap it. I'm throwing a minnow on it, then I'm just kind of swimming it and reeling it, let it go deeper, things of that nature. So bigger profile, can look like a bluegill, can look like a big gizzard around the bank, and especially in the springtime, pre-spawn, post-spawn, pre-spawn, especially, but you can do it year-round for sure. Anytime you're on grass, fish are going to be feeding on bluegill, brim. Pre-spawn, their females are really trying to feed up. When the males first came up and the females get there and they're still wanting to eat a little bit because they know they're about to burn a lot of calories, that is amazing bait to put on the cover.
Absolutely.
This right here it's a spit and image swim jig. This is a 3/4 ounce. And I use this. I'll put a big gizzard shad trailer on it like that. And we're swimming this 3/4. So if anytime I'm around deeper grass, I'll throw it. But anytime I'm in open cover, around timber, like at fork or something like that, I want to swim a jig. Big meaty hook. It's got, if you can see the weed guard is not very thick. So it's not designed to be put around a bunch of cover. It's designed to be softer and thrown more like a swim bait, if you will.
I got you.
Where the West Logan, it's got pretty good weed guard there. It's made to really go around and cover. It's probably got, I'm going to guess that's a 4/0 hook. Strong, sturdy. It's got a nice plastic guard as well.
Gotcha.
Okay. This right here, we call this the Soukup jig. A buddy of mine, you're going to see some of this. I had them made 3 years ago. I've had them made forever. I think the original concept of this came from, I think it might have been Jewel Bait Company originally did a smoked peanut butter jelly smoke, I think is the name of this actual color. Now, I've brightened it up, so I'll use a little bit wider ones, and I use a silver head a lot of times. Yeah. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because if I want this thing, if they're out deep on our ledge, now when am I going to throw a football jig? When they're on ledges or when I'm dragging? Anytime I'm dragging, not around a lot of heavy cover, open ledge situation, I'm going to drag a football jig. It's going to land. The tie is horizontal, so it kicks up here, and I can pull here, and it's going to drag like this. Most of the time, I've got some kind of crawl trailer on it, most of the time. And if I want this to look like a crawl, well, I just put a green pumpkin on it. So now it looks more like a crawdad. If I want this to look like, let's say, Pickwick Lake, for example. Last time I caught them real good on this particular jig, I was at Pickwick, and they're feeding off of shad. Well, I'll put a white trailer on it. And that there comes in why I got the shiny silver head. So when it comes falling down, 20 foot deep, it comes flying down, they look up and the sun's shining off that. So it's kind of like a jig and spin a little bit. So that's something personally that I do. When it comes to football jigs, 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce, I got these in my book. This is literally the only thing I bring with me. Literally the only thing. Now I've got some 1/2 ounce and 3/8 ounce that are jig heads that are more the black and blue and the brown that I'll bring with me. But that's if I'm up shallower, lighter cut, stuff like that. When it comes to pitching docks, flipping, anything of that nature where I'm going to be around on cover, these are the two that I've got. They're both the same thing. They're Arky jig heads, just Arky style jig heads. These are homemade, black and blue, brown. You can see I've kind of cut some of the top strands off, so that one's kind of a little bit pokier. I throw this with a right here. This is, Berkeley trigger crawl. I'll put a trigger crawl on here, and that's, 99% of the time I'm throwing either black or blue. And I've had some really good days on docks. That's the only jig that I'm throwing now. I've got another jig here, and forgive me for not remembering off the top of my head the name of the company. This is this is green tackle, greenfish tackle.
Yeah, greenfish,
company. Yeah, greenfish. So this is the same thing. It's a combination between an Arky head and it's just an enlarged Arky head, but it's got a little bit more round. So but the way that the angle you're going to see this. So the Arky head I have, you see how that comes this way?
Yep.
So I can swim that. Now this one comes this way. See the eye, the difference? So this one's going to be made more for when I'm wanting to drag a heavier jig. All right. So this, like I'm around docks or heavy cover brush piles, 20 foot. I can't get this through a 20-foot brush pile very easy. Not without hanging out.
Right.
Now this has got a little bit of head to kick off, and once again, everything you're doing with a jig, my dad used to see all the time. He fishes for big fish. Jig is a big fish bait. So you can see heavy hook, heavy wire. It's got the rubber skirt. Just a big profile deal. This is I think Tyler Williams has made a living this last couple of years throwing that jig. So those are my standard that I have with me is just like jigs. Then, you got your jig heads, like here's a Ned rig, right?
Yep.
I just take a little Cinco, cut that dude in half, and boom. Now you got the little Ned rig going along. This is my standard shaky head. This is a Strike King round bend. I throw it on a Strike King worm. That perfect plastic.
Yep.
I throw it on green pumpkin 90% of the time. I'm showing you my backup color, which is a peanut butter jelly.
Yep.
Because I don't want to use one of my green pumpkins right now because I'm about out of worms. But that perfect plastic will stretch and go forever. Wow. This is the I've used this for over 10 years now. I don't have any other shaky heads with me when I'm shaky head fishing. That's the one I fish. I'm gonna throw the Ned rig when I've got a lot more exposed cover, like rocks or something like that I can't get hung up in. I'm not gonna throw it around a lot of wood at all. It's not smart to throw it around wood. I'm gonna throw it around smallmouth. Smallmouth seem to like to spiral a little bit better, be a little bit more aggressive. I'm gonna throw this a lot more around largemouth. So that's kind of my. Then you got the hard head, the old wobble head, the old biffle bug, and I still throw the original biffle bug on it. So it's gonna go on, thread on just like that, go around, and I go ahead and T-expose it just a little bit, and I tuck it back in.
Yep. Like
that, and you wobble that thing on the bottom. You can swim it a little bit as well, and man, fish love that thing in the spring. Now, summertime, you got a wobble head here. This is actually tungsten, so this is actually a 1 ounce head, big 6/0 hook. This is gonna be like your Kentucky Lake, your Pickwick Lake, your Grand, going deep on Grand, your lakes like that you got big schools, big fish that go deep, and that is a jig and worm fish killer in the summertime when they go in the deep ponds. Of course, it's going to stand up. It's just a mega shaky head. So I'm throwing a shaky head, but I'm throwing it on 20-pound test line and a 7.6 flipping stick. So
I wonder how that would work up here for the smallmouth.
I don't know about that big worm, but I think you could take that wobblehead and put like a speed crawl on, and really get their attention. But the big worm may work. I've never done it for smallmouth personally myself. So
cool. And that shaky head is a killer on spots. I know around like Lake Cumberland and Del Hollow, that's killer on spotted bass up around here.
Yeah, I think that would be my. If someone said you could only pick 3 baits, that would probably be maybe my second pick that I'd have to have with me at all time to make sure. I mean, as far as filling limits and even catching big fish, that shaky head, you can catch them everywhere.
Absolutely.
When I first learned how to throw a jig, the guy that taught me, he said, I have 3 colors: black with a black trailer, black with a brown trailer, black with a blue trailer.
There you go.
Nothing wrong with that.
Hey, I will say one thing that we haven't talked about is like when you're up on the James River in places that have crabs, you want to go with a black and blue, but you want to go with like a sapphire blue trailer.
Yeah.
Because you want it to look more like the crabs and stuff like that. So that's another time, that you want to use a blue.
Yeah, that's all he would throw, sapphire blue.
Oh, wow. Great color.
Yes. All right. Anybody got questions for him? Barking Hoover says we call that the Tuesday rig.
Tuesday rig.
That must be a Mardi Gras thing, huh? Barking Ruger, is that a Mardi Gras rig? But I was going to ask you on the swim jig. Now, do you do the Alabama shake, or you kind of mix it up, see what the fish want on your trees on the swim jig?
Yeah. So I don't come from the Alabama shake area. I'm coming from more like I'm swimming it more like a spinnerbait, chatterbait kind of come through. So, and we don't have a lot of grass in Oklahoma. So, but when I go down to like Texas, it's around grass. Yeah. When I say grass, we're talking about emergent hydrilla and stuff like that. So you're putting more of a paddle tail and you're letting the paddle tail do the thing. And now, as I've gone, to Alabama and gone southeast to Eufaula and the different places, I've picked up on the shake, keeping it high when you've got like willow grass and things of that nature that they're that aren't emergent. And you're trying to keep it and just hit the holes. That's the only way you can fish it. If you throw too light of a head, you don't get that reaction from them. So you got to throw a little bit heavier head, and then you just have to keep it moving. But I mean, that takes a skill set of its own to do that all day long, just to sit there and. But yeah, time and place, I guess.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then on your wobble head, do you do anything besides? Do you do it kind of fast or stop and go? I've kind of messed with the wobble head a little bit last year, but is there any guidelines on retrieving the wobble head?
Well, I mean, fortunately, I come from where Tommy Biffle created it, and I know from his direction and just hear him preach to everybody. He says cast it and reel it, and I try to do that like a crankbait a lot more, but I've got to where I can throw it just like a typical football jig and just let it sit out there and then just drag and stop and drag and stop. So there really isn't a wrong way to fish it, and that's what's so cool about it. If you want to tick every rock, you can tick every rock, but you can also take it and just swim it like a crankbait and have it bounce off and shoot off and reel off, and that's where you get those reaction bites. So at the time where the jig bites, tune down, when you start stroking a jig, like when you start stroking a football jig, at the same time that you can take this and use this right here is a 1 ounce head. You can throw a 1 ounce and you throw it in 5 or 10 foot of water, that thing's going to move fast. And so you're moving it pretty dang fast. And you're trying to create a reaction bite. So.
Oh yeah. And it works shallow. I think a tournament over Center Hill near Nashville, and boater's flipping the jig. I started flipping that shallow through the grass, and I'll fish for him. So really impressed me.
I had a really unique situation happen years ago when the Wobblehead first came out, and I went into a creek. This is just a Bass Nation tournament. When I went into a creek where some fish were setting up on some stumps, cold water came in. The fish were gonna spawn. They're still there. But I was the third in line on a 150-yard stretch, and we were literally boat to boat to boat. The boat in front of me had his trolling motor on the guy's motor, and I had my. We knew each other, so there wasn't a conflict there. And so I'm like, I can't flip the standard thing that everybody else is flipping because they're flipping in front of me and they're all good flippers. So what I did, I love you too, John. That was awful sweet of you. I took a wobble head and actually put a chigger crawl on a wobble head, and I would flip the stumps, and old school bump the stump, kind of like the old school bump the stump with a spinnerbait. I would kind of let that wobble head settle down next to that stump, and I kind of pop it, and it would hit that stump, and I could feel it go, and it would tumble in the roots, and then boom, the fish would grab it. And I mean, I had my limit behind everybody really fast. So it's something I haven't done for a while, but it's definitely anytime you're trying to get a reaction, the wobble head's a good option, and you got a ton of cover.
Absolutely.
Put that into my arsenal this year.
Absolutely. And I got turned on to wobble head because I got a friend of mine. I think I called him after Dale Hollow or something. I said, "Hey man, how'd you do?" He says, "I didn't do worth a damn. My co-angler schooled me all day." I said, "What was he throwing?" "Wobble head." Wore him out. I said, "You should have asked for one. He probably gave you one, But
I think jig fishing in general, one of the most important factor to pay attention to is rate of fall. And if you're reeling horizontally, then it's the speed, because that's going to judge the speed. But for the most part, I've always been a guy to throw a heavier jig than people. And the old school guys that I was around did the same thing, and they got big bites, they got reaction bites. I think that it's something that we kind of get away from a little bit now, but that rate of fall is more important, and that's why you'll see most of my stuff. 1/2 ounce is my smallest thing I got out here,
Right. Makes sense, and plus you get to the bottom quicker too. So I mean, I think that's a plus.
That's pretty much the same way I am. I started out throwing a 1 ounce jig, so because everybody else was throwing 3/8, I'm like, no, I'll go with an ounce.
That works.
Yeah. All right. Barking Rooter says, sprayed grass color.
Yeah, that's good down in Louisiana. Yeah, I hear you, brother.
Yeah, I've been whooped by sprayed grass before from a guy that was a co-angler behind me. Yep.
Wow.
They're going to look like a bluegill, the purple and blue and the green on it. Yeah.
Max 813 wants to know what your best jig or what's your best jig advice for Floridians?
Floridians. That's going to be hard. Yeah, you've got two different kinds of. You got two different kinds of jigs there. I mean, you got an opportunity to swim jig like crazy in Florida.
Yeah.
And so, I would say the best jig advice in Florida is learn how to. I mean, I would probably have a 5/16 and maybe a 1/2 ounce jig on. I'd probably have one right next to each other and be picking up, and I'd be rolling. And you just put the trolling motor down and roll. And the thing is, just don't put it down until you learn how to get bit on it. Because I know that seems simple. I guess that's the time on the water thing. But I think in Florida, if you put a 5/16 ounce and a 1/2 ounce jig on and swim jig, when I'm thinking now, I'm thinking swimming through the middle of the Kissimmee grass. I'm thinking about swimming around the cypress knees that are on the inside of it. I'm thinking about swimming around the pads. And you get a few bites. Usually, if you get in an area where there's fish, you may not catch the big ones if you're doing that, and you might, but they're going to tell you where they're at. So once you've identified where they're at, I will say Kissimmee grass, the edge, I won a tournament down in Florida, and I was throwing a 3/4 ounce weight. Now, I wasn't throwing a jig, but you could have thrown a heavy 3/4 1 ounce jig on those, like 5 to 6 foot to 8 foot deep Kissimmee edges, grass edges. A lot of times there'll even be shell out there behind it. So those would be the other, punching into that kind of grass and flipping that would be a deal. But yeah, once you've covered all the water with a swim jig, and you may be getting the female bites. If you're getting the females, then you don't have to slow down. You can keep covering water, but then you can kind of come back and you can soak a jig more in those areas and pick those areas apart. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
That's it for now.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, when do you decide? Is it the cover or structure you're throwing? Is when you decide what rod to use?
Yeah, I mean, first thing,
the more parabolic or a stiff.
Yeah, first thing I'm going to identify is what cover and structure that I'm fishing. then that's going to tell me what lure I'm going to pick. It's just going to be a tool to me.
Yep.
And then once I know what tool I'm using, then I identify my rod, my line size. So it's going to go in that order.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, what's the most weird thing you caught on a jig? I think I caught a big snapper turtle one time in Mississippi. But what's the weirdest thing you've picked up on a jig?
The jock strap, 100%.
Oh, no. Wow.
Yeah. Somebody was getting a jiggy with it at one point, and I came along and cleaned up house. So
hid the evidence.
Marital advice: get rid of the evidence.
Yeah. Throw it in the lake. Somebody get it with a jig later. They'll clean it up later. Oh my goodness.
The first fish I ever caught on a jig was a sunfish. It was I thrown a 1 ounce jig, and I don't know, but I actually hooked it through the mouth. I looked at him like, huh.
Oh, yeah. He's a hungry little feller.
Yeah.
No, you're right though. You can't really go wrong with a jig. I mean, if you want to sit there with it all day in your hand, you're going to get decent fish.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I remember I followed Denny Brower back in the day. That tells you how old I am. He always said it jig brings you a better quality fish. You can catch them spinner baiting or cranking, and compared to jig fish, your jig fish is always going to be heavier. That's what he always said.
It always seemed that way.
Yeah.
Now the one thing we didn't. Go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I said the one thing we didn't really talk about is reels and reel speed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So most of my close encounter, big flipping baits, I'm going to throw as fast a reel as I can get away with. For me, I throw arc reels, so that's 8 to 1. I've never messed around with any of the 9 or 10 gear ratios myself. I'm not going to throw anything less than a 7 to 1. I'll tell you that. But the reason is if I'm flipping, I want to get that thing pitching at least. I want to get that thing back in as quick as possible because that allows me to make more casts. Also, if I'm pitching, most of the time, I mean, goodness sakes, where I'm from, I'm fishing from 0 to 2 feet, 3 feet, maybe 8 foot in different places. And how many times you flip over there and that fish just starts streaking? You need to be able to catch up that fish as quick as possible and get the hook set into them. So I'm using a faster gear ratio reel. Swim jigs, same thing. I feel like I can always slow that jig down with the faster reel, but I can't ever speed it up unless I have that speed. And swim jigging, you're gonna have to reel it fast, quite a bit. So especially if you're doing that Alabama shake, I mean you're shooting that thing. Now with that being said, the opposite is if I'm dragging. If I'm dragging out on a ledge, and I really need that bait to sit and settle, I may tone down my reel if I'm being impatient.
Yeah.
All right. So I would prefer to still use an 8 to 1 reel because I want to be able to catch up with that fish. Even when they're deep, let's say they're 25 foot deep, I cast out 80 foot, one picks it up and starts swimming off or swimming to me. I want to be able to catch up to it and set the hook. Now, that being said, if I'm being impatient, which is a lot of times, I'm reeling, the more I'm reeling, the more line I'm pulling away, and I'm not letting that jig settle in and drag. So that's when I'm going to go down to like a 7 to 1 gear ratio reel. I don't really personally go down to like a 6-3 to 1 or anything like that for myself because I still want a little bit of that speed because I think that helps with the fish hook and landing. But once again, it's so that bait will settle, and then I try to do my best to make sure I'm moving that jig with my rod tip and picking up line and not getting in a situation where I'm dragging. Because a lot of times you'll fool yourself and you'll hit a rock or hit something periodically. But once I've done 3 or 4 of these, I've moved that bait 12, 15 feet. And I've only felt 2 bumps. That means that jig was going. Now, if they're on that bite, great. We got it figured out. But if I'm really having to jig, and count as I'm dragging along, or if I'm needing it, I mean, last year was the year of dead sticking the jig. For me, I can't believe how many tournaments I had. I had Pickwick. I had a 23-pound day. I'd take the jig and I'd throw it out there on that fish and just let it sit on the bottom. They weren't hungry. They'd go down and inspect it and look at it. And if I moved it, they'd take off. So I'd sit there and look and like, this is a live scoping thing. This is how okay, I got one on it. So that's the only reason I'm not patient for nothing. People ask me, how do you fish? Aren't you supposed to be patient? I'm like, no, that's how I fish. They're like, how do you fish? I said, impatiently. That's my style. I fish impatiently, So, in a situation where I know a fish is looking at it, I don't want to reel too much. I don't want to take that fish away. So.
Absolutely. A good point on dead stick. And I got big fish as a co-angler one year, and I found it by accident. I flipped out, and I had a professional overrun. And I was getting my loop out, picked it up, and there's a 3-pounder on it. I'm like, hey, light went off. Forecast later, I had a 5.6 on a dead stick jig.
Yep. This is a true fishing story. I was fishing Bass Nation. I was a co-angler at this time, and this was back when the co-angler. I was probably a boater, but I drew out as a co-angler, or the boater pairs. And there's a gentleman in our part of the woods that could have gone pro if he had the opportunity. His name was Billy Lemon, and he was winning everything on Grand. And so I drew him for the second day of the tournament. He'd won the BFL the weekend before. He'd won the Bass Nation the day before. And so he'd won everything. So I was like, we're going to his fish, right? And he was throwing an A-rig, but he could skip it behind docks and do all sorts of cool stuff with it. So we were going to his fish. We went to Grand, and by like noon or 1, we had like one fish in the boat. They just, one of those things where the day changed, right? Completely changed. So I was dragging a jig and not getting bites. So I didn't have much tackle. So I was like, I got to do whatever I can to try to get bites. So I remember sitting down, getting my reel out, stripped all my line, took all my line off, and I put 15-pound test line on, which is, for me, is light when you're talking about jig fishing. And I'd gone through all sorts of different jigs, different sizes, and I ended up going to a 1/2 ounce hard head with this same green pumpkin biffle bug on it. Same thing happened to me. I'm fishing behind him. Now he's getting a little bit, more antsy as he's kind of flipping docks a bit more and trying to move and try to figure things out. And I skip up under a dock, and because I new line or whatever on, right? Thing balls up on me. Well, by the time I had it picked out, we were like 2 or 3 docks gone from where we were at, because he's not, he's fishing. And I pick up and it's heavy. And I'm like, no way. We haven't got a bite hardly all day long. I set the hook on that thing, and it was a decent fish, 3 or 4 pounder, and I put it in the boat. And then I realized, it's like, oh, they're still here. You just got to let it sit. So I'd throw out there and I'd drag. And as soon as I felt anything that felt like wood or cover, I didn't even hit my reel and just feed it on as the boat's moving, just sit there. And I'd feel and I'd feel and I'd feel. And then boom, pick up and swim. Ended up having a really good day that day. I don't remember exactly how much weight I did, but I caught a limit, and it was a solid limit, and did it all behind a really good fisherman. And it was 100% the dead stick. 100%.
Oh yeah. I said I found by accident sometimes, but it's like, oh yeah, that's how they want it, and it clicks. Just boop.
Especially on those cold fronts. On those cold fronts.
Yeah, and you talk about a shaky head. I had a event last year on the BFL, and my boater I think I just threw up my shaky head to shallow. My boater got a fish, and I'm netting it, and he says, "Hey man, I think I saw your rod jump." I said, "It's probably it's hung up, but I'll get it in a minute." And it was like 5 or 10 minutes, and then I had yellow braid on it on a spinning rod, and it was like in the middle of the cove. I'm like, "Oh heck!" So the fish was on it. I don't know how long he was on it, but he had it. So that's funny.
Yeah. Barking Lures has another comment here.
Yep. There we go.
Wants to know what's your opinion on the Cliff Crochet deadbolt reel with no drag, fully locked in hub?
I don't know anything about that, but if you ask me about drag and everything we've talked about, I don't want any drag on these heavier. The only time that we've talked about that I don't want drag on my swim jig. Because when I'm swimming that thing, and we got 65, 50-pound braid, 65, and they eat it, I'm jacking them. I want moving them over cover, around cover, and I just want them coming in, and we'll get in the live well and we'll talk about it. You know what I mean? And so same thing with my 3/4 ounce jig, my 1/2 ounce jigs around docks. My football jig is a time that I may go to a little bit of drag. Reason being is if they're deeper, you don't have to sit. You're reeling into them a little bit more, so you got room to play them. Shaky head, obviously we're not talking about that on a shaky head rod, the spinner rod. We got drag. You have to have drag on those. So for the most part, 90% of my fishing, I don't got drag either. I mean, I'm cranking that thing down. I'm cranking it down.
Yeah, because you got the heavy line. You already got the heavy line. They're not going to break that.
Yeah.
Get the old vice grips out and go to town.
That's right. Crank her down.
Yeah.
So if I was just learning how to throw a jig, what would be 3 pieces of advice you'd tell me? Okay,
so I would definitely want to talk to you about the rod line you're using. It's very important because you're going to get your heart broken if you're out there with an ugly stick, trying to throw a jig like we're talking about. So you want a medium heavy to heavy rod. All right. You want a little bit heavier line. Talked about the reel. But okay, so after that, that'd be one. The second thing that I would tell you is when you throw your jig out, if you're throwing at an object of any kind, you want to throw just a little bit past it. So it's the approach, past it. And then you want to feed your line out. You don't want to hit the reel right away, because when you do that, you click and you get that pendulum. Now you pulled your bait away from that cover that you're throwing at. So, and you don't really want to move it until you know that it's completely settled to the bottom. So you need to learn how to count line, watch line. So you throw out there, go ahead and keep your reel, don't engage your reel, watch your line come down, and kind of know, start the old counting method like we've used to do forever. Know that you're kind of fishing 10 foot deep. It's going to take about 10 counts to get down the bottom. And I think a lot of people that aren't really good at jig fishing yet, haven't established, they start moving that bait before it's really even settled to the bottom. So let it go ahead and get settled. Let your line fall and settle. Most of the time that's good anyways. Now watch for it to swim off, because a lot of times you're going to get a bite on the fall. So watch for that. Engage your reel and then lift up and pull with the rod tip. And then you got to remember, if you pull your rod tip just like this, if I do that, that rod's 7 foot up there, it just moved 4 foot.
Yeah.
Right. Which means your bait just moved 4 to 6 foot. So, you're doing little movements, smaller movements. Now I reel left-handed, so that's why you see me doing this. So and you're picking up the line with your reel. So you want to keep bottom contact. You want to just count and find out what you're fishing for. So that would probably be, number 2.
Yep.
I would say the third thing, and man, these are just the way they come to my mind. And that's been important for me, is really watch when you're getting that bite, because there is a lot of times in jig fishing, and I would say the way that I fish and flip a lot, maybe 90% of the time, I'm getting a jig bite before it's even settled on the bottom. And so remember that, because it's all about efficiency and time if you want more bites. So if you're flipping up next to a tree and that thing goes down 2 feet and starts swimming off, and it happens again, now the fish are up sunning themselves for some reason. They're up high and they're suspended, and the rest of that cast is just wasted time. So, flipping, letting it fall down, no bites, you don't have to sit there and work anymore. Just reel back in, flip again. And then, so being very aware of in what water column you're getting that bite can be, I would probably say this when it comes to flipping jigs, I've probably won more with a jig or caught more bigger fish, and I had better days on the water just being able to identify that quicker than most people. And then that allows me, okay, it was the back corner of the dock, 2 foot down, 3 foot down, and 6 foot of water. I recognize that bite. Now I go run that pattern real quick, and I fish 100 of those poles while everybody else is still going in and out, And so I think that's probably one of the identifying where and how that bite's coming from, and being able real quick to repeat it is probably the third thing to watch out for.
Absolutely.
Max813 wants to know, how far away from cover do you work a jig before just reeling it back in?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we just talked about. It depends on the situation. For example, the opposite of what I just talked about is, what if you're getting it on the swimming it back? And let's say that they're suspended off the cover 15 feet off the cover horizontally. You could have your boat too close. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're aware of that. Let's say you cast up to some willow grass and you're swimming it. You get past the willow grass. Well, there's some other emerging grass, and those fish just happen to be sitting out there waiting. Well, if you use your boat too close, now you're on top of them. So if I make a long cast and I got 30 foot of reeling in, all of a sudden, boom, I get bit by the boat. I'm going to try that a few more times,
Oh, yeah.
So it has a lot to do with where that bite's coming from. I'm paying a lot of attention. At first, you're just kind of guessing. You're filling it out. You're using your instincts. You're using the knowledge that you have. You're trying to put some things together. You think they're spawning on stumps. I'm not going to move it that far away from the stump before I reel back in, for example. If I think they're on and it's muddy water, and I think they're on gizzards, and I think I'm going to swim in through some grass, I'm not going to reel it that far away from that muddy water, because in muddy water, they're closer to cover. If it's clear water and I think that they're on some kind of shiner and they're smallmouth, goodness sakes, man, you might have to reel at 40 feet, beyond that, because they'll follow it the whole time, and they're just like, yeah, and then they decide to attack it when it comes upwards. So, I'm paying attention depending on the circumstances. I'm really paying attention to how I'm getting bit to really answer that question.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, John, we're almost an hour in.
Wow.
So,
Top flies, you have fun.
We did it.
All right.
So what's your last time we asked you, and I can't remember what it is, but what's your favorite homemade cookie?
Oh, I think I said snickerdoodle last time, but I just had a chocolate chip cookie my daughter made today. And it was the best cookie I've had in a long time. I don't know.
Oh, awesome.
She's 11. She's getting good. My daughter's getting good at cooking. I mean, this is
good.
This is a bad combination for me. They sneak in there and make something. They don't even ask mom anymore. They just come bring it in for me.
Oh, wow. Good problem to have.
Yep.
Yep. All right.
Just so she cleans up her mess, though, or you'll be in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So do you want to go ahead and talk about some of your sponsors now?
Man, I don't have very many sponsors at the moment. I got, Save More is a company that I've started outdoors, and we're selling a lot of fishing tackle right now, but we're just kind of do overstock items. So if there's any kind of, which means we could end up selling anything, but we do have a bunch of fishing tackle at the moment. So if you're looking for, fishing tackle at a extremely good price, this is not used tackle. This is all good stuff that we just got at a discount. We're passing that discount on. Other than that, man, it's just home and the wife right now. We got Odie Hammer Rods is one of my sponsors that I'm really working with. Excited to see what we can build from there. If you guys haven't done anything there, check out Odie Hammer Rods. We've got a lot of the bigger custom rods that we're using to catch some of these bigger bass down in Texas. I think I'm pretty sure there was like a 16-pounder or something like that caught on one of the rods. So those are going to be, we're going to be at the Bassmaster Classic, and we'll have those there as well.
Oh, cool.
All right.
Good deal. Awesome.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate your time as always. And if you're just tuning in, you're going to have to go back and watch this whole show, because you basically got a master's class on jig fishing from one of the best in the game right now.
Lots of jig juice in there. I'll go ahead and say it.
Yes. So we're all married. Would you like to share some of your words of wisdom for us?
Oh,
Wait, let me get my pencil.
Yeah.
Wait.
I'll share you something. I'll share you some wisdom. All right.
Okay.
Women love a men that clean. Women love men that clean.
Yep.
That's why I spend hundreds of hours organizing and cleaning my tackle to impress my wife. So
there you go.
That's what you can do.
Good tip.
Yep.
Excellent.
That's
and
like gold,
always,
man.
We do have a what do you want? I can't remember what I called it last night. A warning on here that if something does happen, we are not responsible for your marriage.
Oh.
Opinions shared on the show may be the opinions of others and not of the guest or the host.
Yes.
I do have some really good marriage advice on my fishing. You go to John Soukup Fishing Pro, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, and you guys scroll through some memes. There'll be a lot of memes every day, fishing memes, just having fun. Trying to bring. I don't know what's happened. I think it's the social media era the last 5 or 6 years. Just everything seems to get nasty. I give podcasters a hard time. I'll pick on some podcasters now and I love getting on podcasts where I can just talk fishing again. Like, let's talk Denny Brower and old school jigs. And not all this negativity out there. I mean, like, it's all Jerry Springer drama. It's sickening. It's not healthy for any of us. It's bad it's bad. I mean, I don't know if everybody understands how bad it is for the industry, how bad it is and everybody wanting to fight real quick and talk about all this junk and make up lies and all that stuff that's going on. So, I do pick on some podcasters now. I don't necessarily call them out by name, but if you're going to do some negative stuff, we might do some jokes on some podcasters. But other than that, we talk about just fishing memes and tell a little bit of fishing stories here now. I got a lot of fishing stories. I need to start get on there and tell. I've all of a sudden became one of the old guys, which is kind of weird. Older guys, I should say, not old guy, but older guys. Where I'm like, I got stories from 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and then these kids I'm talking to are fishing against. I'm like, these stories are older. They haven't even been alive as long as I got these fishing stories from. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we started this podcast to say, hey, we're not going to go in all the drama and all that. So that's how we started out, man. We're 100% behind you on that. That's how we approach it. We don't do any drama or all that. No, I ain't got time for that.
I'm not afraid to say Randy Blockett is one of the ones that causes all the drama. But
he stirs it up.
He says, "Son," Barking Roer says, "Son, you're old when you need glasses to find your glasses."
Yeah.
Or you have them on your head. Your wife says, "They're on your head, honey." Oh, yeah, I knew that. I knew that.
Yeah. I will tell you guys what's going on recently in my life, though. I will tell you
Okay.
this.
Sure.
So I've got a 17-year-old son. We're dealing with him becoming a senior now and all that. 15-year-old daughter. She just had her quinceañera party. I don't know if you guys are familiar with a Mexican quinceañera party. So she just had that. Got an 11-year-old daughter. And then we've got a 3-year-old son. Now, the 3-year-old, his name is Joel. I won a tournament down in Eufaula, Alabama. Found out a couple months later that we're having a oops baby, I guess you call them. Isn't that what you call those kids when you're 3? When you're in your 40? When you're in your 40s?
You call it a blessing. You call it a blessing.
Yeah. Oh, that's right, a blessing.
Yeah, I've done that.
Oops
I've done that.
blessing. And I was at Harris Channel Lakes at a Mexican restaurant. My wife texted me in Spanish. Kids are all sitting around there and very sarcastic, very upset, not happy. It says, "Congratulations, you're going to be a father again." And I'm just like, "Am I reading this thing right?" You know, like everybody, because I don't speak that good of Spanish, but enough. I'm like, this is not. I look up and it's dead serious. I'm like, what am I gonna do? Like, I cannot. And you know what? I end up winning that tournament. So like,
hey, good mojo.
Yeah. So as I guess maybe the fourth child goes when you're older, and he's just turned 3 and he's not potty trained yet. And we've had all the other kids whooped in line by now. So this week with this ice storm and the snow, we got 3 inches of ice and like 6 inches of snow. The whole house is on potty train mission. And so we do these dances and we got him going potty like a big boy, potty like a big boy. We're giving high fives. I've been dancing in my underwear. I've been, So we're 3 days in, and guys had some pretty good success so far. So that's good. That's what's going on in my world right now. Is we're potty training 3-year-olds. So.
Awesome. And,
that's cool.
Hopefully we get to see you sometime on the final cut days of the Opens.
Yeah, Kentucky Lake in a couple weeks, as long as we don't have any cancellations. I mean, there's a lot going on. It's with everything that's going on cancellation wise, I guess the river's up. We got cold weather. It's trending to be nice, which means it will trend to be back down again by the time the tournament starts. With the spring up and downs. And I finished 129th at Sam Rayburn with our 1 day that we had down there.
Oh,
and
man.
It was not. That's not a good finish to have. It's not a good finish on the Opens. But at the very end of the last 5 minutes, I had a big one follow my jig out, another big one follow my jig out, and then I had one on that jumped off that was like 3.5. I think I finished with 11.5 pounds. I would have had like 13, which would have been the difference between like 70th place from 129, which would have helped a lot of points.
Oh yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, that's the difference between a 1 day derby and a 3 day derby. Is like, if I had one more day tomorrow, I'm back here tomorrow, and I figured them out. Like I figured out they were okay. They're on what they're doing. I'm like, okay. But I didn't have that opportunity. So I've got to go capitalize. I got 3 more events to slide into the top 50 on the Opens. That's how they're doing it now. Once you're in the top 50, then you qualify for the EQs, and that's what we're looking at doing.
Now, they do start the points over when you hit the EQs, correct?
Yeah, points start over.
Everybody starts at 0.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
That's why I don't have as much stress, and I guess I've been doing this long enough to know the ups and downs of fishing. So.
Yep. And talking about the Opens now, since we don't have co-anglers, do you have ride-along marshals, or how are they doing that now?
No, but I'm keeping my camera like I always have. So I have I got a camera, and I've been through enough negativity with the camera situation to know, like, I've got a 360, shows the whole boat live well, making sure that it's tracked all the time.
Cool.
Doing my best to make sure that that's there. So if there's any questions, so like on the elites, that's the way they did it too, because we didn't always have marshals. They would they would pull your card, and I mean my card was pulled a couple times, maybe more than a couple times, at least 3 times that I could think of. They pull your card, download it real quick, and they're like, okay, we don't see anything, you're good to go, kind of deal. So, but on the Opens, I may be overlooking the rules. I don't think there is anything like that. So,
but you're covering yourself doing that. You got yourself covered. There's any questions or that's good. Good insurance, man. Good insurance.
Yep. Because I'll tell you
last comment of the night is Barking Guru says real fishing stories. It's all about potty training.
Yeah. Yeah. I promise you get that 3-year-old potty trained before Kentucky Lake, and my wife's a lot happier, and I'm catching more fish at Kentucky Lake. I promise you. That's how that works. That's how that conversation goes together.
Oh, absolutely. I got no doubt.
How do people get to the do you have a website for your Save More?
Yeah, it's just SaveMoreOutdoors.com. Yep.
Okay.
One of the coolest things that we have that I like is there's a frog that we developed. It's from a company, Mojo Fishing, but it's mine. And it's called the Hypnotoad. And we got that frog on the market, I think, for like $5. We'll have it at the Classic again to show off.
Wow.
It's the softest. It's the softest frog on the market for sure. So if you're looking for a frog that's softer, you know, the skin is softer, so it hooks up better and floats a lot higher. We got a popping frog and just a normal frog. So if you're a frog fisherman, go check out the Hypnotoad. Yep.
Cool.
I'll have to look at that.
Absolutely.
That's one of the things I want to learn this year is frog fishing. So, all right, John. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yes. If there's anything we can do to help you out, let us know, and just enjoy the week. Get Joel potty trained.
Yep.
All right, guys. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, buddy. Have a good one. Yeah, y'all need to check out his Instagram and his Facebook. He has some killer memes on there all the time, like almost every day. I mean, it's classic.
Yep. We could have charged for this one.
Man, there's a lot of jig juice on here. I'll guarantee you.
All right, folks. Well, we're gonna take a day off. And we'll see you back here Saturday talking to Rock Holiday about getting sponsors from the back of the boat. Sponsorship, you don't have to be a professional. You can just be a run-of-the-mill guy, I guess, like Rock, who's leading our league in fantasy points right now. But all right.
And he's good to get sponsors, too, so he'll have a lot of tips for you.
Yeah. All right, so everybody take care. Have a great night, and hopefully see you back Saturday.
Thank you all. Peace out.